Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark. I am your host, of course, Daniel Rhodes, and I am sorry about our incredibly lengthy hiatus. We've been really busy here at the Archaeological Society. My guest today is Brian Murphy. Brian, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I work as a curator at the Florence Indian Mound Museum and Pope's Tavern Museum in Florence, Alabama. And I've a position that I've been in for about 4 years now. I graduated from the public history program at the University of North Alabama. And yeah, I've been in this position for about 4 years and I absolutely love my job.
Well, we all love this kind of work. It helps us get our hands dirty and it keeps us, it keeps us busy, if nothing else.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's always something going on, and it's great to partner with different organizations like the Alabama Archaeological Society and work on projects and events and interpretation together. So it's been a pleasure from our perspective to kind of branch out and collaborate. So it's always fun.
Yeah, it is definitely, always a worthwhile endeavor when two organizations come together and they manage to make something that not only works, but people that enjoy coming to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for those of you who have been keeping up with us on social media, we had our first ever student-led junior archaeology program at Pope's Tavern over this past weekend. So Brian, tell us a little bit about Pope's Tavern. Like, say, for those folks who couldn't have actually made it this weekend, what would they expect to see when they're there?
Yeah, so Pope's Tavern really has kind of several different moving parts. And there's the history of the building itself, and then there's kind of the history of the collection, and then there's kind of the history and the interpretation of the museum. So the building itself is an old one of the earliest buildings in Florence, but not the earliest and not the oldest. It's definitely dates to the 1830s. And the architecture is really kind of unique in that it's very vernacular and kind of pieced together over time. And what we've been able to identify anyways is that the earliest part of the structure dates to about the 1830s. And then other buildings were added on, incorporated into the main structure that you'll see when you come to visit Pope's Tavern. We know that parts of the building that's there were built as a residence house, and then we believe that the large sort of main room of the building was built as a boarding house. We know this was in use during the 1850s. We have evidence of that. During the 1860s, during the Civil War, it was used as a hospital space. And so there were several buildings in Florence that were used as hospitals, and Pope's Tavern was one of them. And it was a place where people from the United States Army and the Confederate Army were brought and were able to recover with the help of townspeople who were kind of taking care of people at that time. So after the Civil War, the building became a private residence. It was a family that lived there for about 90 years. And they also kind of rented out rooms of the house. So at different times when there was an influx of workers into the city, different rooms and areas of the house could be rented out. And by about the 1960s, the city purchased the building, and they purchased it after a Chamber of Commerce drive to raise the funds to match the price that the family had received as an offer from a gasoline company. So the effort, the impetus of the museum was really an effort to save it and to save it from destruction. So it was about a $25,000 drive to purchase in 1965. The museum opened in 1968. But the collection from the museum actually came from what is now the University of North Alabama. And the collection dates to about the 1930s, when history faculty at was Florence State Teachers College started a small collection that was housed in different buildings in different rooms at different times. And that collection was primarily from the early sort of prominent planter families of the area and their family heirlooms and things like that. And that was primarily the collection that came to the museum at Pope's Tavern. And since 1968, when the museum opened, it took on more of a Civil War interpretation. So we acquired more Civil War artifacts. So we kind of have a collection that doesn't necessarily date to the building itself, but is important to the overall region as a repository for this sort of material culture from early Florence history. And that's primarily the period that we're interpreting is, this period from the early 1800s through the Civil War. We have recently added a new exhibit that explores the history of slavery in our area. And so the museum right now is housed in two different buildings and covers, like I said, early 1800s through the Civil War. So with all of that, and with the museum interpretation and the collection and the building itself, we realize that we have these sort of disjointed, somewhat disjointed narratives that we're really trying to tie together. And one of the ways that we've examined to kind of get more information about what happened at this site and what the history of the site was, with archaeology. Let me back up here for a minute and say that it is called Pope's Tavern, but we don't have any evidence of it being called Pope's Tavern prior to 1951. Okay, so we've got a building that's built in 1830. Nobody that we can't find anyways. Any reference to being referred to as Pope's Tavern until 1951. So there's a real big gap in terms of the interpretation of this space. And we're really trying to fill in that gap by doing some research as much as we can in terms of primary sources, and exhausting most of those as we have. We kind of turn to archaeology as a way to interpret the landscape of the building that will hopefully allow us to get a fuller picture of what the property was used for, what types of activities happened in this area, in this property, and importantly, the sort of time period. Some of the myths about Pope's Tavern have the property being occupied by a tavern as early as 1811. So that's a big jump from 1830, and it's kind of a really different history. If you're talking about 1811 as being, years before the formation of the state, years before the area was opened up through treaties with specifically the Chickasaw. So if that's the case, that's significant. We need to know more about that. So that became the impetus for us to really dig into, quite literally, the past and try and figure out, what was this site used for? What happened here? And what do the artifacts and features reveal to us about how this site was used? So we did apply for and received a grant through the Alabama Historical Commission in 2020 to bring in the Office for Archaeological Research to come in and do 2 test units, and they started that in August of 2021. We have a draft of the report, which it's going to be an ongoing investigation, we hope, of continuing to kind of reveal what happened in this space. But so far, we haven't found anything that pushes our understanding of the site prior to the 1830s. So that's what we go with at the museum. That's our interpretation at the museum. And until we find something that challenges that, I think that's the most logical interpretation of that space.
And that, I think is a great segue into why we did our junior archaeology program over the weekend. So we wanted an opportunity to not just, aid in the excavation, but we wanted to be able to create a space where, children and families could come in and learn how artifacts and interpretation changed just simply by finding something as simple as a piece of pottery in a hole in the ground. I know that's a really simple interpretation of what we do, but it's accurate.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's such an important part of historic preservation and understanding how the past is interpreted. And I think that's kind of where we are with our museum right now, is trying to understand the various ways that the past is synthesized in interpretation and in narratives. And so archaeology is a tangible way that people can come out and physically, get their hands dirty and learn from trained professionals how the science and the practice of archaeology can help us to tell stories about the past and to tell what happened in the past. And so, some people are really drawn to it, obviously, and some people, think this might just be some cast off garbage or something like that. But it's amazing the stories that these little bits and pieces can tell us when they are collected in a responsible and scientific way, and then interpreted as part of the story that happened here.
Yeah, that was something interesting that I didn't think about until I started first talking to some kids at the event, is they couldn't conceive of, a time period where garbage collection was a regular occurring event, that, this is like a piece of a dish or a plate that somebody had literally just thrown out their window because it was broken or they couldn't use it again. They couldn't, understand that there wasn't a system of, trash collection at some point.
Absolutely. And through the process, there's so much that we're teaching, and that students are coming to kind of the realization for the first time. How are things deposited? And like you said, where did people put their refuse? Where did garbage go? What types of systems did people have for either collecting or sort of maintaining those household garbage systems, and also getting into some of the questions of what people ate and where they ate, and different things that different sort of ways of living that people right in their own community had 200 years ago, so and 150 years ago, and so forth. So it's really, there's a lot of questions that can be investigated, and part of the beauty of the archaeology day, the junior archaeology day, was seeing those questions and seeing children respond to those questions and ask those questions and kind of engage with volunteers and people around the site in different ways. And it was a beautiful thing to see students interacting with history on a Saturday outside of school. So I have to commend y'all for organizing, and really want to say a huge shout out to all the volunteers who came and made this day, including you, Daniel, who made this day such a success for our community. So
For statistical, data, I did see a Facebook post from Pope's Tavern that we had over 200 people show up this past weekend. If that puts it in perspective for any of you who weren't able to make it are locationally or geographically challenged things.
Yeah, and that's significant. That is a significant number of people for any museum to have. So we probably handed out, 200 people. That's everyone, including families and everyone else who came along. There were probably about 100 certificates handed out as part of the students receiving the actual certificate of completing all the different stations. So there's some pretty incredible event, and just amazing to see again all of the people who came out to interact with archaeology and history on that day.
So, Brian, you've been doing this job for, I think you said 4 years now. In your opinion, why do you think it's important for museums to do events like this? Maybe not archaeology based, but just community based events.
Yeah, and I think it really is in our mission in most museums to speak to things that are relevant and to be centers of community learning. So we want to be embedded in the community in a way that we're not just putting on events for the community, but we're responding to what's going on in the interests of the community. And obviously, as you saw, there's a huge interest in learning about the past through archaeology. And so, or else people wouldn't have come out. So really what we want to be able to do is build on that success and to embed those community stakeholders into our programming as volunteers, or as people who are going to come out and be more involved with the museum, as people who are going to come out and tell their friends and bring their friends to some of these events. So it's really in our best interest to be, one, a community engaged center, and then two, a place where the community can come and learn and kind of co-create in these spaces with us. So these events where there's no admission charged, people are coming out, they're learning about the past. That's exactly what we envision for ourselves as a community museum.
And it says something about people, actually wanting to come out and learn about their community, that, they can put their hands on something that's, 150, 200 years old, and they can see it and touch it, and they realize that it's real, that it actually happened. It's not, some documentary or movie that their teachers have forcing them to watch.
Yeah. And I think part of it too is teaching the importance of archaeology, and I think that was a message that was reiterated at all the stations. And what do you do when you find an artifact, and where do artifacts go, and how do they end up at museums? And is this just something that I can pick up and take home? And so, like, understanding the importance of all that, and understanding, to put that all in context. I hope that people come away with that with an appreciation for what these artifacts, when put in the right context and found in the right context, and what they can do for a community, and how they can be interpreted and tell stories about the past. Because I think that's I don't know where students learn that outside of perhaps a classroom, but if they can come out to the museums and learn about the importance of those things I just talked about, that's a huge benefit, I think, for the community.
And this is something that I've noticed a lot of museums and other organizations, like community-based organizations, have gotten back into the flow of doing, since most people believe that COVID is over. I don't know if that's necessarily true or not, but people are, wanting to get back to doing what they love, like working with the community, getting their hands dirty, and coming out on a Saturday and eating popsicles.
Absolutely, and we envision a lot more events like this. This was the first sort of run at this that we had tried, and I think because of the overwhelming success of this event, that it's going to be a mainstay in our sort of yearly programming. But we're also thinking about summer camps and history camps, and how we can incorporate archaeology into part of that sort of overall programming that we offer. And that's definitely been something that we've been formulating for the last few years. But like you said, it's been difficult to do public programming and to kind of gauge who's going to come out and how are people going to interact with these things. Archaeology is a great way to do that, as we found, and having a great space like Pope's Tavern, where there's plenty of outdoor space, there's covered space underneath the underneath a porch and inside the building as well. So we're excited about the where we can go from here now that we're getting back into public programming.
Yeah. So Brian, we're probably headed towards wrapping this up. Do you have any last minute advice, anything you want people to take a look at and help them along the way?
Yeah, we're in the process now of digitizing a lot of our collection at Pope's Tavern, and that's accessed through, or can be accessed through, we have a public portion of that available on our website, which is florencealmuseums.com. And so we're working on identifying a lot of the items in our collection that had previously not been identified. So we just encourage everyone to, if you haven't been to the museum, stop by and see us, or interact with us through our website, through our social media pages. And find a way, if you're in the area, to stop by and see what we're doing. And also to, again, just want to really thank the Alabama Archaeological Society and all the volunteers, specifically you, Daniel, and Marcia, Holly, for coming out and organizing what was really a huge successful event, Junior Archaeology Day, and all the student volunteers who came out from UAB and from UNA to help with that, because they really made a difference, and it was really great
guys,
to see.
we cannot stress the importance of how important volunteers are to programs like this, because museums, nonprofit organizations, we have a limit on the kind of help we can actually pay for, and you guys showing up to offer to help and offering to do it for free, it's just amazing to us, and we cannot appreciate that enough.
Absolutely. I think you said it perfectly, just to find people who are willing to put down, hours on their Saturday to come out and do this. It's invaluable for nonprofits, for museums. And so we're grateful. So that would be another thing that I would stress is, find a way to donate time if you have it, to help out with events like this and to help plan to be a part of that. So it can be a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and you brought this up, Brian. Speaking of being in the area, our quarter meeting for the Archaeological Society will be at the Florence Indian Mound Museum this Saturday. Registration begins at 8 o'clock, and I believe it's supposed to go around 3. And the day after that, Pope's Tavern and the Indian Mound will be open to the public. So you guys are more than welcome to come hang out with us at the meeting. Come check out Florence and Pope's on Sunday. So we hope to see you there. Appreciate it, everybody.